point where I would like to take some questions. If anyone has any questions. Oh, good. Ma'am.
Well, so far, the three of you have touched on, the drama and your various acting backgrounds, and I'm just curious as to, like, I wonder if you could just talk a little bit more about just the dramatic experience of working in England or in Britain, meaning, because it just seems to me, and that's my personal opinion, that the level of acting, like if you take horror, the Hammer horror films, for example, it's just that the level of acting is so, I'm trying to find the right word, superior, as opposed to, you look at a lot of horror films from perhaps other countries or the US around that same time period, and even today. How was Hammer able to get the top-notch actors into these films, and like you guys all have, sound very literate, you have posh accents and everything, and you look at a lot of the low-budget type horror movies around the world, and you just don't find that anywhere. And do you live and breathe acting and just drama and all of that?
I think the answer to this is William Shakespeare, actually, because we in England, Britain, are fortunate to have had William Shakespeare, who is the greatest dramatist of all time, and we are able to perform in his plays, which are very demanding and require a very high level of acting, so we get a lot of experience at it. And you've got wonderful playwrights here, of course, fantastic playwrights, but I do think that American actors are brilliant film actors, you see. I think they're marvellous film actors, and I don't think we English quite can aspire to that level. I think we might knock them for six on the stage, but I think Americans beat us at film, because they make some superb films. But we have had the opportunity to perform the greatest playwright that's ever been, amongst many other playwrights as well. I think that would be my answer to your question.
Maybe with the exception of Kevin Spacey, who does pretty well on the stage.
Maybe yes, I should say something. I agree with Kate. There's a kind of naturalness that you see in a lot of American film acting, which is the trick, isn't it? To do as little as possible to get. The thing about the camera and the big screen is that every tiny movement, every flutter of the eyelid, twitch of the cheek muscle is eloquent. It means something. You have to be very, very good at conveying thought without overdoing it. And I think perhaps we tend to. I think this is where Hammer is enjoyable, because it's allowed us to go a little bit further, perhaps. A lot of modern horror films seem to rely a lot on is it called CGI? Yeah. On the effects, on the sort of the strange, wonderful prosthetics and so on and so forth. Of course, with Hammer, it was all what you see is what you get. It had to happen there. At the end of Twins of Evil, you see Karnstein decomposing, but that took all day to shoot, a little bit at a time. Back to makeup, change it, make it worse, put it back in position with nails to sort of to mark the spot, and a little, just that last sequence which took a whole day to shoot for that reason. Whereas today, of course, you just do it on a computer. I'm digressing now, but yes, back to the question. Marlon Brando, and we can list dozens of brilliant American actors. So it's a good point, but I think the thing about Hammer is it's a very special genre, and it has its own particular appeal. There are other wonderful British films, of course. It's very odd. some of you may know, but I had a fantastic opportunity at a certain stage in my career to work, to be directed by Roman Polanski and to work alongside Walter Matthau, whom I revered.
That was Pirates?
Pirates. And the film, as you know, was a gigantic, enormous turkey, flop, which bombed, partly because it was enormously expensive, and that kind of makes it worse. Because people are very sensitive about losing so much money. And I went through a sort of terrible crisis when I went to see the English premiere of Pirates. It was in a cinema in Chelsea. Can't remember. And I took along several members of my family, and we kind of went into this empty cinema. About 10 people in there. Really. So by the time I came out, I thought, that's the end of my career. The film is a disaster because it's me, it's my fault. All that English overacting. And yeah, I blame myself, and I think it actually affected me very badly. In fact, it affected me at a level of confidence which I hadn't expected, and I had no further contact with Roman Polanski, and that was the end of it. So I went to see it again recently. It was screened at the BFI on the South Bank, and to my amazement, and I don't know if anyone is familiar with the film, but you may or may not agree with me, but I realized it wasn't me at all. Actually, I'm not so awful in it. I'm not saying I'm brilliant, but I'm not so awful. I turn in a nice, sort of workaday, respectable performance, but the weakness of the film is Walter Matthau, would you believe? He does it in a Cockney, which is so laboured and so slow and so kind of relished, with lots of letterbox of the mouth. But it drags the film to a pace which you don't expect in a pirate movie. It becomes a bit of a dirge. And I thought, wow, why didn't I realise it at the time? I didn't. So that's, in a way, trying to answer your question, is that it kind of works both ways, doesn't it? You, if you're lucky to have a sensitive director, really nurtures you and looks after you. I can't say that was true about Roman. He didn't have the time. It was such an enormous production. There were so many things to be taken care of with every shot. He didn't have the time to look after you. In fact, there were all these great stars. There was in the production team, the lighting, cameraman, and so on. And at the end of a long, hot day of standing around in costume, he'd be there saying, when can I put my actors in front of the camera? And there'd be 3 minutes left of the day to shoot before they had to pack in. That sort of thing was happening a lot, isn't it? It happens a lot. A lot of hanging around. Clark Gable said, I need a good pair of shoes or something, I think, to be an actor. Comfortable, because you're going to be standing around an awful lot.
Something else you asked actually about our accents, that they're
Very posh.
posh. What you got to realize is this kind of generation that we are, making films in the 50s and the 60s and so on, and that was pretty much how you spoke. I mean, yes, you may have taken on. I took on a child part as a Scots boy, so okay, I did a Scots accent. I did a Cockney part, and so on. But essentially, your training was actually, if you like, BBC or Oxford or Queen's English. So that is our generation. If you come through the more recent generations, of course, you have all the regional languages are actually now much more fashionable. We're out of fashion now in terms of our accents. So that's part of your question as well, because we're from that generation.
But the level of voice acting is still there, even with the people that are speaking with the regional accents today.
This is
because
true.
it's fashionable. But when they want to take on a Scotsman, or and even if they're not, and they're from the south of England, they want to play a Welshman, they can do it. And if they want to play an American, you can't even detect the accent. Whereas, like you said, with Walter Matthau, he was really laboring.
Yeah.
That's a very good point you brought up, and it's something that's never really addressed or even mentioned, and it's true. You come from a specific time period and theatrical background, and yes, today actors from England, yes, it's all changed, you know, because of the, lack of a better word, melange of cultures that are also there now. More Indian and it's just everything has changed. So, not Manchester doesn't even sound like Manchester, the accent anymore. That's changed. And, a northern accent doesn't sound like it did back in 65, 66. It sounds completely different.
I think that's television has done that. It's kind of flattened out a lot of accents, a lot of regional accents. But I think the perception to your question is that would you agree that we tend to sort of notice that American movie stars particularly are paid to do the same thing every time. They're not paid to be something different. That would make the producers nervous. And I think that's something which we are more fortunate as English-based actors, that we can do a lot of things. I spent my entire career, because I didn't look English, playing foreigners. I played Greeks, Frenchmen, Italians, anything but a quintessential Englishman. And I remember trying to get an agent in France, and she said, if you look like Peter O'Toole, blonde, blue eyes, we can use you. But because you look like a Frenchman, what's the point?
Yes, sir.
Kate, sorry to bring this down a little bit from how elevated it's been, but in The Vampire Lovers, on the new Blu-ray, Madeline Smith said she was not very aware of the lesbian context of the film. How aware of it were you?
Darling Madeline Smith is an innocent, and she wouldn't have been aware of it. I was very aware of it and resisted it, I have to say, because in those days, 1970, it was, I don't know, there was something a bit prurient about it. I thought, this is unnecessary. This is, it is not part of what Dracula and Bram Stoker and all those people were about. They wouldn't go there. So I have to say I resisted it and resolutely refused to do nude scenes and all the rest of it. But that's because I was trying to protect my own career. But Madeline, bless her heart, wide-eyed, innocent girl, lovely girl. But those big, big eyes absolutely reflect her inner soul. They do.
Another question, sir. Yeah.
This is for Kate. The late Ralph Bakes, who only did a few Hammer films. You were with him in Horror Frankenstein. What was he like off set?
Ralph was an absolute darling. I liked him enormously. I enjoyed working with him tremendously. I had known him before, and he was a very gentle man. It was a tragedy that he died at 50, but he was a gentle, sweet, lovely, lovely man. And I would love to have worked with him again, but in fact, Martine Bezic got the part that they had thought I might play, which was his opposite number in Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde. But Martine, of course, looked far more like him than I ever did, and so she got the part. And I was nearly in something called Twins of Evil, but no, Ralph was a honey. He was a real honey, actually. Gentleman, and, miss him a lot, really. Miss him a lot.
Yeah, time for one final question. Make it go.
A few conventions back, Veronica Carlson mentioned that, as you said, when we were making these movies, we thought of them simply as a movie we're making. They're going to have a small shelf life, probably never to be spoken again. For each of you, at what point did you realize, especially with the Hammer connection, hey, there's something going on here. Suddenly people are asking me about these movies from 30 years ago.
But in my case, it was Ingrid Pitt, who I met as a. I finally did about 4 years ago. I decided to go to a convention. I never even knew it existed. I had no idea there were memorabilia things going on in the world. None of it. I just didn't know it happened. I didn't know this sort of thing went on. And I met her there, and she was delightful. Wasn't she? She was. She wasn't very well, but she was battling on bravely. And she said, "You should be doing these things. It's go out there, meet your fans, meet people who'd like to meet you." Well, so this is the second one I've ever been involved in. The last one was at the NEC last year, same time last year. So you were there?
Yeah,
you were there.
You were next to me.
I was, yes.
You were my neighbour. Well, I would say I started getting a lot of fan mail after The Village of the Damned. And I think that's when I probably, when I was 10, 11, when it was released. And I think that's the first inkling that I got that, oh, wow. I'd be getting fan mail from Canada, from America, from South Africa, people I'd never met or anything. And that was the first inkling that I got that, oh, people seem to really like this movie. But to be honest, I was only a child. To be honest, I was just doing a job. My mum had just said, "Go work. You're old enough. Earn some money." And to be honest, I wasn't even thinking of what went on. Once I'd made a movie, I was gone. I was on to the next one, and I was making film after film after film. I made 10 films in 3 years as a child. So I wasn't even thinking of the end result or my career or anything else. Maybe I had the luxury of knowing I was getting out, so it could all collapse later and it wouldn't matter.
Did you give your chance to answer that?
I'm not quite sure what I was answering. I would like to say that I had a big movie break from Peter O'Toole in an amazing movie called Great Catherine, which was an adaptation of a play by Bernard Shaw. And in it was a wonderful American actor called Zero Mostel, who was just absolutely great. It's sort of equivalent of your Walter Matthau. And he overacted wildly in the film, but he was brilliant. The film was a total flop, and I had a huge break, but it got me a lot of work. Jeanne Moreau, the great French actress, was in it. It was a wonderful break to have at the age of 26, and it got me into other movies, but it didn't do what I thought it was going to do. And I've worked with Roman Polanski as well, and knew him, and it's extraordinary the turns, the twists and turns one's career takes. But I had no idea. I had heard about these conventions from when I was out filming in Dynasty in Hollywood. All these British actors and actresses kept turning up and said, "Oh, we've come over to do a convention." And I said, "What's that?" And they'd all come over. I've been invited over especially because of whatever TV series they were in at the time, which was very highly popular. This is the first time I've been to one in the States, and it has been so far a very enjoyable experience. And I think it's wonderful that all you people are so keen on what you've seen that you take the trouble to come and meet everyone. It's been a most edifying experience. I thank you for it. It's lovely.
On that note, we have to conclude this. I want to thank everybody for coming. I especially want to thank our guests.
Superior, as opposed to you look at a lot of horror films from perhaps other countries or the U.S. Around that same time period, and even today. How was Hammer able to get the top-notch actors into these films and like you guys all have, sound very literate.
Who is the greatest dramatist of all time, and we are able to perform in his plays, which are very demanding, and require a very high level of acting, so we get a lot of experience at it. And yet you've got wonderful playwrights here, of course, I mean, fantastic playwrights, but I do think that American actors are brilliant film actors, you see.
Posh accents and everything. You look at a lot of the low budget type horror movies around the world, and you just don't find that anywhere. And do you live and breathe acting and just drama and all of that?
I think the answer to this is William Shakespeare, actually, because we in England, Britain, are fortunate to have had William Shakespeare.
This is the point where I would like to take some questions. If anyone has any questions? Oh, good. Ma'am?
Well, so far, the three of you have touched on, you know, the drama and your various acting backgrounds, and I'm just curious as to, like, I wonder if you could just talk a little bit more about just the dramatic experience of working in England or in Britain, meaning. Because it just seems to me, and that's my personal opinion, that the level of acting, like if you take horror, the Hammer horror films, for example, it's just that the level of acting is so, I'm trying to find the right word,